Welcome to Costly Conversations. My name is Aaron, and this is the Costly Conversations podcast. Conversation from me to you to whoever our guest is, and today we have the awesome and amazing Taylor Abney of She the Seeker Radio podcast, or whatever it is that you know her from. I think she recently changed her name on social media, if I'm not mistaken. We can ask her all about that. And what I want to talk to her about is her interesting lifestyle. She is something of a nomad. Last I checked, anyways, she is the type of person who doesn't have just one place that they call home. I guess it's one of those world is your oyster situations. But we can ask her about that, and I'm excited. So, hang on. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Taylor, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, all right. So, just for the podcast side and those who are watching us live, you may notice a little bit of a delay. This is just, the lumps that we have to take because Taylor's something of a nomad and just kind of thugging it out there in the world, hopping on Wi-Fi's and stuff, just so she can come on and talk to us. I'm honored that you are taking the time out of your Sunday to hop on the podcast. And really quickly, for those of you who are listening live, if there is any sort of audio issues, too loud, too quiet, just let us know, and we'll try to make adjustments on the fly. Taylor, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I've been on a social hiatus, so this is a great way to kind of break the ice. So thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I noticed that. Well, the first time I noticed you, I think I tweeted out something, and Talon Sai reposted it, and I was like, okay, great. There's another person here who seems like they know what they're talking about in regards to like podcasting and kind of making content. I love to meet people in the space who are doing that. And I looked into you, and it turns out you had a podcast, and you even had the legendary, I can never say her name correctly, Lena, who is it, Michalek?
Mitchellek?
Yes. Okay. I said it right. Woo! You had her on the show, and I was like, oh, okay, wow, this person clearly is either really well connected or has something about them that people like Lena want to be a part of. And that speaks volumes kind of just right off the bat. So I was like, we got on the horn and just kind of connected for a little, just a second. Well, it never is just a second these days, right? And I was like, yo, we've got to get her on the podcast. She's doing something interesting. You have a background as a competition shooter, which, the audience is going to love that, clearly, because, shooting is life. And, or something like that. But let's talk about you and your story, because you're kind of an eclectic mix of things, right? Where did you start? How did you get in this space? How did you get connected with people like Lena? Where did you start?
I've I've been in the firearm realm. I got my first gun in 2013. So I was 23 at the time, and then 6 months after that, I started competing, and things just really snowballed. So I would say within the first 2 to 3 years of competing, aka basically owning a gun, I started getting more involved with the firearm industry. So over the last 3 to 4 years, I've become full time. I got a contract with a couple of different major YouTube platforms, started creating content for them, and in my own space, I became nomadic. So I started traveling to major three gun matches and really just living on the road and doing that by creating YouTube content for other people, and then I would write articles like gun reviews, stuff like that, and then competing in major three gun matches, and that, and working a lot of those matches. So I basically have just been like a gun gypsy. And then, yeah, like a A couple of years ago, I met my husband, and so now there's two of us. So I do base. You were asking about that on the pre-show. I do base a little bit in Kentucky, but for the most part, we are full time on the road.
Excellent. Wow. See, that's interesting because I don't want to share all your business, but sorry, I don't want to share all your business, but his job is really dependent on him being in a certain spot, more or less. Like he and I but I know the schedule for guys like that is kind of a little bit more spread out. Does that ever, I guess, interrupt your travel plans, or how does that flow?
We've been figuring that out. We got married pretty quickly after we met, and it was just a big cramming of two lives. His
Yeah.
being tied to being a firefighter for a city, mine being kind of a traveling, you know, gun person, if you will.
Right. A
And
gun gypsy. I've
he
never heard of that.
he ultimately he works. He figures out his schedule where we'll take off, and normally I'll drive out to an area, whether if it's an event, competition, whatever is going on. He'll come out for like a week or two, or sometimes he'll even take 5 weeks off. It all depends on the schedule, and I'll drive the rig back. He'll fly back. Sometimes he'll drive with me and fly back. We balance that, and it's just dependent. Over the last couple of years, it's been really dependent on just what makes sense to us and our schedule and what I'm trying to drive for at that time. There's a lot of variables, like anyone's decisions in these things.
Right. Yeah. And I just thought it was so interesting because when you explained it to me the first time, you're like, okay, yeah, like I'm like a true nomad of just sorts. Not like, oh, I'm just living off the grid in my camper in my 40 acres, but you're like literally just continuously moving. And then
Yeah,
he
I'm at a
literally has
coffee
a
shop
job.
right. He
Yeah.
does, yeah. Right now, I'm at a coffee shop getting Wi-Fi, and we just balance the areas that we stay in. I just came off of a huge trip in Minnesota, so I've been back for just a few days,
What were you doing in Minnesota?
and uh, a few things. Three Gun Nationals
Hmm.
was it took place in Minnesota for the first time. That was a huge event in shooting sports. Um, yeah, a lot of cool stuff happened. And I did a couple of locals. I did a lot of exploring. I went to Voyager National Park. I did a solo kayak camping trip. Just, yeah, explored all sorts of things.
Yeah. That is freaking sweet. Now, are you, I think maybe you said it before and I just barely missed it. Are you a sponsored shooter or is that just something you just love to do?
I do work with quite a few companies in terms of sponsorship. I
Hmm.
am on Team Winchester. That was like my career pinnacle sponsor to gain. Um, they've been a great company, and they actually sought me out, which was amazing. And I've really enjoyed working with them. And obviously, I like using a lot of ammo, so that works out well.
Yes.
And I also I have worked with Walther as well.
Hmm.
So again, I that was my really my first competition pistol. So getting approached by them was yeah, that was really huge. Basically, they came up to me and they're like, how do we get you to not shoot a sig? And I was like, really easily, actually. We could just talk. So
Yeah.
it's been great. And I serve this really interesting space where I'm a liaison of sorts between competitive shooters, firearms, and also that outdoor space that has just been booming, where it's overlanding, camping, survivalist stuff, all of that. I kind of travel in those two realms.
Yeah.
And a lot of these companies have been really looking for people who, you know this stuff, and it's been really cool. It's been neat to see the industry change.
Yeah. I mean, the only person in this space, well, maybe there's like two. The Gun Collective, he just rigged out his van for when he travels to different cities, John, and it's looking pretty good. It's coming along. And then Talon Sai, who I've been watching for years, and finally had him on the show maybe about a year or two ago, and that was kind of a dream come true because it's like, man, when I was first getting into the gun space, he's the guy I watched, and I was like, wow, his videos are sweet. I want a Voltec. I want to, it just makes you want to buy stuff, which is not good for your wallet, but it's fun. And then kind of following his journey, and he's kind of more or less distanced himself from the gun space, periodically uploading a gun video or an EDC update with a gun in it, whether it's on the main channel or not. The powers that be made it hard for him to make gun content with strikes and demonetizations and stuff, and that's hard. But point being is he dove really deep into the overlanding, off-roading, outdoor lifestyle adventure sports slash life space. And I'm guessing that's why you follow him, or did you watch him before that?
I Yeah, because he's into all of that stuff. I didn't know about him for the longest time, so he
Mm-hmm.
was recommended to me by someone else in the space, and then I'm like, oh man, this guy's content is just very legit,
Oh
and
yeah.
I appreciate any creators that take a lot of pride in having professional level stuff, because I understand the amount of work that goes into it. And yeah, when I saw his account, I was like, I totally want to support this and hear what this guy says. We need voices like that.
Right. And like the amount of love and dedication the guys like him put into it, it's really something that is hard to miss. But really quickly, I try not to interrupt the show too much with the comments, but we have some people who are loving what you said about gun gypsies. Obsidian Tactics, sponsor of today's show, said I'd buy a gun gypsy shirt for the special lady. So if you don't make the shirt, somebody else will. So you better hop on that right now. Like go to Etsy, drop your shirts right away.
Let's do
And
it. I'm
yeah,
I'm for it.
yeah, gun gypsy. Like that's just
Actually,
such a cool thing.
and you know what? I'm not the only one who's done this. There's a few of us, but Dave, it used to be formerly the Three Gun Show, but he changed it to Prep and Press Podcast. I don't know if you know him at all.
I've heard of it.
Uh, he's awesome. So he also started off as a gun gypsy, and I didn't know him until after I started doing it. But every now and then I find other people that have lived this lifestyle as well. Actually, Rhonda from Safari Land, she also was a gun gypsy in a van for a little while, and there's very few of us. It's a hard life. It's an awesome life. I mean, like, I've washed my hair in like range sinks before. Like, it's totally just it. But I've been at ranges from Wyoming to Florida to everywhere in between, and I will, like, it's some of the most beautiful camping, and I feel like wherever I go, I have a community that, like, there's always someone that either I've competed with or met at an event, and they just are like, hey, if you're in the area, let us know. And it's been awesome.
I want to ask you a little bit about the kind of explosion of the outdoor community and where the connecting points are between like the gun community, like overall, like industry type stuff, and where that intersects with like, I don't want to call them like outdoor hippy dippy types, but people who want to get a little bit more in touch with kind of where it all started and kind of move away from the techno centric world that we're in, if that's the right word. Where, where, how, why is this thing blowing up? In your opinion, the outdoor lifestyle, overlanding, for real, and how does it connect to what we do in the gun space?
Yeah. Well, we all know post COVID, that is what really changed the industry. COVID made this entire world realize, holy moly, there's a whole outdoors to explore and be a part of, and everything recreation based just boomed. No
Yeah.
matter what kind of outdoor sport it was, from disc golf to rock climbing, it's just everything is like gone 300 times what it was prior to COVID. And overlanding is a part of that. And again, it was just one more way for people to go outside, to get away from other people, away from the cities. And the irony of all of this, so I hit the road, like, packed all of my stuff in a storage unit. I'm driving on the road. I'm like, this is my first time, first week, first day living as a nomad. And COVID hit. COVID hit the first week I was on the road. I went from New
Wow.
Hampshire to Virginia. Oh, it was
What timing?
crazy. Totally. I mean, it went from being life was normal to I got to my next destination. And ironically, my best friend that I was going to see is travel ER nurse. So she really was like in the thick of it.
Hmm.
And seeing that insight was interesting as well from the get go. But um, overall, I mean, the first year of being on the road was amazing because like national parks were empty. There was no international travel, there was a
Wow.
lot less domestic travel, and I had never been to a national park before. And um, I thought that's how it kind of was because you picture it that way from just in your brain from National Geographic or whatever, that it's this serene, quiet, not a lot of people around. And
Right.
when things started to taper off after COVID, the COVID people bounced back and the population started flooding back in, I was like, what the hell? I mean, at Yellowstone, I had Old Faithful to myself. Like every bench
Wow.
was empty. I was the only person, and everyone I've talked to in recent history about Yellowstone, they're like, "Oh, it's Disneyland." I'm like, "That's not the experience I had." Um, it doesn't always have to be like that, and
Mm.
that's been a lot of what I'm trying to do in this space. Starting to break into is talking about a lot of the conservation that needs to happen, a lot of the awareness, because like places that I camped at and enjoyed and off roaded in 2020 when I first hit the road are shut down. If I were to go back there today, because people don't know how to be outside, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. Um, just overusing areas, and it's leave no trace. It's just when people aren't raised around this stuff, a lot of times they don't know how to respect it, and they don't realize that those repercussions could shut down property. But
Yeah, no,
um,
it's interesting because a lot of guys from like Washington and that kind of general area, there's a lot of, and even I guess Arizona is another one. You have open land where you can go shoot on, and you see a lot of guys who are serious about being in the space long term. They go to these public ranges and it's just completely trashed out, like things just that could be easily picked up, like if it's just one guy or his friends, like 10 minutes, let's knock this out. It's just left and it's just tore it from the floor up, as they say, and it's like, wow, why is this like this? This is I thought we liked what we were doing. I thought we liked the privilege of being able to be here or whatever, right? Like so that's what we're seeing even where you
yeah,
are visiting. Yeah.
well, and there's a great organization I've done a couple of cleanups with called Keep Our Deserts Clean, and it's an overlanding community group, and everyone goes out in their trucks and their SUVs and their whatever, and they pick up trash in the desert. So they get big dumpsters, and we always bring away like boats and crazy stuff. And one of the biggest forms of trash is like shooting debris,
Mm.
and it's people who go out in the desert like what you're saying, and they totally just don't clean up after themselves, and they're not respecting the area. And as a shooter who also uses public land not just for camping but for shooting, it's important to talk about that as well. Now, the people who are doing that, like, I don't necessarily know that they're the people who are invested enough in firearm education to be watching shows like this. I hate to say, um, but I would hope anyone who sees someone like shooting TVs or doing things that they shouldn't be in our public lands, that you might address it. Because again, that's what gets places shut down. And yeah, I've had places that I've loved shooting at outside, and then you come back and it's like because a whole bunch of busted TVs, and then it's a safety hazard, and then all of a sudden you come back and there's a whole bunch of boulders in front of the entrance.
Wow,
So
that hurts my heart because really, at least here, if you don't own your own private land, you can't just go somewhere and just start shooting, unless you know somebody who knows somebody, right? So the idea that, man, like we're just gonna go and have unlimited free land where you can shoot for free, and then all of a sudden you can't use it. That's just crazy to me. Just because we didn't take care of it, and not, like you said, it's not necessarily the people who are really invested, but it's people who either don't know any better, or maybe they do know better but they're not invested enough to care. We do have a few questions coming in, and we'll try to save some of those for a little bit later, unless we start running out of questions, and then we'll just jump in it. But guys, in the live chat, feel free to drop in your questions for her as we're talking, and even if we address it, maybe there's a different angle that we can talk about it for later. I suppose my question is, and forgive me if you said this and my mind was just trying to play catch up. Why did you decide to go off grid? I know, COVID was just starting. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm done with life as we know it. I'm just going to go do something else. Like, why did you go off grid?
that was totally why I was like, I'm done with life as it is, and I am just going to do something totally different. So I had a lot of let's say family trauma happen that changed my perspective on life. And at the time, I was working a very corporate job in Boston, and going up a
What were you doing?
more traditional. So I worked for Salesforce. It's a
Oh wow, yeah.
technology company. I actually worked in their e-commerce division, which is yeah, it's been very useful with the whole social media side of things to know a little bit of that. But I did that before, and then I did automotive with Toyota before that. So now I consider myself a corporate survivor when I introduce myself, and it's been a big process of transitioning into being a entrepreneur and figuring out life, and yeah, so that's kind of what I did before. This is like Taylor 2.0. And I think when I first left, people were like, oh, how long is your trip going to be? And I had to explain that this is not a trip. This is the new lifestyle that I'm choosing. And it was just, I realized how short life was, and I had to pursue something that allowed me to, yeah, see through on all of my dreams. So by competing at national matches and being able to go to all of these gun events and places that I always wanted to be, I've been able to get a lot of exposure and meet a lot of people and meet some of the most incredible people. And it's just opened up a lot of doors. So I love traveling, and yeah, I like moving all over the place. So
That's
it's
great.
worked out.
Well, I appreciate you, sharing that, because, obviously a lot of that is personal, like your impetus for making a big life change. Like, you didn't have to share that. I appreciate that you did. And I think that we could all kind of take inventory of where our life is headed, where we are, kind of things that are happening, and decide, hey, I'm going to make a big shift. And it doesn't have to be a negative change. A lot of people choose an extremely negative outlet for what's going on in their life, whether it's, like, oh man, I'm having a bad time in my marriage, or, like you said, with family and whatnot, or even, hey, I'm failing out of university or whatever, and then they just go on a complete bender and do other things. You could just quit your job and become a nomad. I mean, that's not a bad thing. Your parents are probably going to be a little disappointed, like, admittedly, but why not? Like, what's holding you back? What's holding me back? I got a wife and kids. Place I got to maintain, podcast that does need to be plugged in. But you also have a podcast, so maybe that's not a good excuse for me. Can you tell us a little bit about your podcast? You started it more recently. You had Lena on, which is a big get. Like, let's just say that. But tell us about your podcast, why you started it, where it's going, etc.
Yeah. So first of all, I am working on the second episode. Uh, it takes a lot of work, as you know. But you do live podcasts, which is so awesome. My podcast is the whole thing has been a total experiment. So I am interested to see how people are going to respond as I continue to release episodes. I'm not getting a lot of audio feedback, so I just want to make sure you could hear me.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay, cool. I was just checking. And as I mentioned earlier, I get to meet a lot of extremely fascinating people. The kinds of conversations that a lot of people need to hear, need to be a part of from all different walks of life. And I've started recording those conversations, not knowing exactly how I was going to produce them or what the podcast was going to look like. And it took me a while to figure out what that would be. And ultimately, I've worked on building this whole brand that falls underneath kind of like the seeker outlook, where if you are seeking or looking to do something better or different or whatever in your life, like I encourage anyone with that attitude to follow, because it's not just nomadacy and shooting. I'm into like literally everything, and I will podcast with quite literally anyone. So you never know who is going to be on my show. And as I started recording a lot of these episodes, the podcast became bigger than me. And we talked about this before we decided to do this podcast, but like the conversations and the stories that I have been able to hear, like they're so important. It's beyond me being selfish and like, oh, well, I don't like my, I don't like my podcast or anything like that. It's like, well, no, it has to go out there because these are amazing conversations. Oh, there
Is that the
might be a
train?
train about to come through. Yeah,
Wow.
hold
So,
on.
guys, this is awesome. For those of you who are watching live or can see the video on the YouTube side, there's actually a live
Hopefully.
train in its natural habitat.
Oh my god, I hope this is.
Well, let's see how long it takes to go by.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. This is fun. It's not. It's actually
Oh,
not that loud.
we have some truck frames, some cattle. All right. Well, if it's not that bad, I mean, I could continue on. I don't know what it sounds like on your end.
You're actually just slightly muted. So I'm not sure how loudly you would have to talk to overcome that muting. But how long is that train? Is it going to be going by a while?
I have no idea. I've seen two go by. One was medium size and the other one was short size. So there's no
Wow.
telling.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about your podcast while that's going by. And I think I'm going to try to pull it up. It's Seeker
Oh,
Radio, am I right?
it's got.
Podcast. And I'll try to get the link for it as well.
I probably should have started off with that. Seeker Radio Podcast is the name of it. And a little bit before I launched the podcast, I changed my Instagram handle to She the Seeker. Um, I was formerly just Taylor Abney Adventures, and I made that change because I didn't want to be just another adventure account. There's a lot of adventure and explore accounts, and as we discussed post COVID, those activities have exploded, and so have those accounts. So I was like, meh, I don't necessarily want to be grouped with those, those people.
Those
So
lames.
I
Branding's a
made the
big
name
deal.
changes. Those, I know, and uh, the podcast has just been a great avenue to capture the conversations, as I was mentioning earlier. But it's snowballed into more than that. It's actually turned into a marketing consulting firm. So my guests, who are typically friends, or if we didn't know each other before, then we're definitely friends after the podcast. When I hop onto show with them, a lot of it is become evaluating their social accounts and and discussing like what they want to do in their business, and maybe helping, um, whether if it's photography tips or editing, or even just how to, I don't know, look at like the different analytic dashboards. I mean, everyone's different, and it's been really fun because a lot of collaborations have come out of it. Uh, with the episode that I released with Lena, I did a couple of collaborations. One was with a gun shop, Modern Warriors. We did a rose giveaway, which was amazing. And then the other one was actually with a local artist, where we released some custom artwork. And we did that with that episode as well. So with the next episode, again, I've done collaboration with artists because that is really important to me. I love artwork. I like supporting local artisans. So that is my goal. So that guy was like, "Hey, I want a T-shirt." Like, I actually do that for most of my podcast episodes. One of the more fun products I'm looking forward to releasing is a pike, which is like basically a little stabby device. So I've been mentoring under a blacksmith and been learning how to do Damascus and all sorts of fun things. So we're going to be releasing some pikes that I'm going to forge, and yeah, there's all sorts of fun stuff.
That's freaking sweet. First of all, like let's just acknowledge that you're collaborating with people, and so like it's taking the podcasting thing to like a completely different level. And is it, would it be acceptable to the podcast purists out there? I don't know. I mean, hopefully they don't care. Hopefully they don't care.
I don't know.
But
it's fine. I mean, it's just been running with it because as I started meeting up with people and having these conversations, then they would be like, "Oh man, like how do you edit those reels?" And I'd be like this. And what is just like natural to me is totally to them overwhelming. Where on the flip side of things, like, for me, like managing my website, I'm like, even though I worked in e-commerce, I worked in like sales. I didn't do development. Those are two very different roles. It's like, okay, well, I could help you with photography tips if you help me with website stuff. And I love the barter system, especially where it's like, in my previous life, I was very money driven. Now I'm like, really, I just want to figure out what you're good at and what can I learn from you, and I will teach you whatever you want to know from me. Like, that's my attitude. And that obviously goes for you. Like, if there's like personally, like
oh, okay.
definitely after the podcast, it's like if there's anything I can help with, like I'm legitimately always happy to do that.
Yeah,
So
no,
that's why
I get that. I love that.
It may take a while, as everyone knows. Like, I jump off grid for a little while and then I pop back and I'm like, oh my God, so much work to do. But I do always get back.
Yeah, you do disappear. Like I was hitting you up a while back and I was like, hey, you want to try this or do this? And I was like, just staring at the phone waiting, watch pots never boil. I'm just like, I feel like maybe she's in a spot where she just doesn't have great cell service. And whatever the reason was, it doesn't matter. But that's just kind of one of those privileges or I guess the big life/mental shifts that can happen when you're actually living the nomadic life and actually committing to that is maybe you're not exactly attached to your phone, unlike the rest of us.
Yes, and that's something that I've actually been writing a little bit about lately, is learning how to disconnect from my phone. And that's why I had a hiatus recently from social media and everything, because I just realized, really, now someone, oh my God, wow, you just missed that. I think you guys saw that. There was totally a kid who was riding in the back of a trailer being towed by a tractor down the main street. This is the main street of the town, by the way.
Oh, for real? Wow.
Oh my God, that's so Kentucky. Like, yeah, you guys are getting the full experience. So wow. Yeah, that's yep, welcome to my life. What was I talking about before?
Oh my God. Yeah, people are suggesting different stabby things. We'll hold that for the end. But you were talking about disconnecting. You're actually writing something about disconnecting, and I guess, battling phone addictions or whatever it is that we all deal with in modern problems, you know?
Totally. And I think we all feel that. And I am on the tail end of the generation who didn't have the internet as a major part of like my life growing up and through teenage years. And so it's like I've been able to experience just enough that it's like, okay, like I know this is not normal and healthy. And I've just really taken the time to peel myself away from that. And part of that is like I'm logged out of social media almost always now. And just making like, okay, this is going to be my day to work on the app. So I'll log in and treat it like a job because, um, especially where, like, when I first got the different social medias, I was just like a consumer. I wasn't
Mm.
like a creator. And it very easily, I got used to like just checking stuff and doing things again almost recreationally like we most do. It's entertainment. It's like portable entertainment. And when it started becoming my job, then it was like, oh, okay, well, anytime I'm it's kind of like work. And then it became too much. And I also think that there's a lot of expectations for content creators or whatever you want to call people in this space, um, to do a certain level of production. And I've really been pushing back on that because having worked in sales before, I my entire working life I've been under the pressure of quotas and deadlines. And I mean I've strived under it. I was always a you know did well, uh, but it's like I don't necessarily want that anymore. And so I've been challenging my audience in what they want to see and how often they want to consume it and how often they will accept it, my content. And it's been very fascinating to watch. Yeah, because I keep close tabs on my analytics, and I have kept record of my account from the time it was like 500, like sub 500, um, to where it is now. And this last year I was shadow banned, so that whole process was interesting. And I was able to track everything. I know exactly what video tripped it and what started happening and how it affected my account. But what's been interesting is I've gotten rid of a lot of bots since I've been shadow banned. So that's an interesting side of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I I know you said you worked at, for Salesforce and e-commerce, but you're talking like some savant level dedication type stuff here. And I don't mean to sound at all insulting or derogatory with that statement. Not at all. It's a huge compliment. But I'm like, who has the commitment to study their analytics and to log everything to so that they know exactly what video trips it? Most of us are out here just being like, hey, I think I'm shadow banned. Yeah, yeah. I mean, last couple videos I was getting some good results, and all of a sudden, like it's like a couple hundred views on something that would normally get like 5 to 10,000 views easily.
Yeah, it had to be premeditated because I've skated on kind of the outskirts of the firearm world for a while. I've been very conscious of not tripping any wires to get my account shadow banned. So I've been conscious of that for a long time. And with foreseeing the launch of the podcast, I really like, I hate to say this, but I kind of I didn't want to trip that wire, but I wanted to see what would set it off. And I was like,
Hmm.
okay, and if I could survive a shadow ban, then I think I should be good. Like this will bring me to my, this at least I'll have my core audience because with on Instagram with 40 something thousand subscribers, I was like, okay, well, I'm at a healthy enough place. If something happens, I still think I have good support. I mean, not that I want anything to happen, but I was posting a video about self defense, and that to me was important. So I was like, well, let's just see what happens. And yeah, I mean, I tracked the whole thing, um, and it got reported. And after that, I got on the notifications on my account, and It actually, like the day that I posted it, I was monitoring everything because I was at an event with a whole bunch of friends. So I was actually going onto their phones on their Instagram apps to watch my account because obviously when you're on the inside, you can't always see what's going on the outside. And because I travel so much, I meet strangers all the time. So I'm around, our phones all have these unique, like, you know, let's say numbers that URLs, right? Like our computers do.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes I'm around phones that I've never been around before because they keep track of that. Um, and used to when you would like I would start to type in my username into someone else's app. If I would type in my first name, Taylor, and then AB, then instantly my account would pop up every single time. I could be in California or New Hampshire, it doesn't matter. And then the day that I posted the video that I know that tripped it, I was at dinner with a friend, someone who follows me for a while, and I follow back. And she had to type in my entire handle. And I'm like, proof. Like,
Yeah, that's really frustrating. I'll tell you what. I was at GunCon, and this is actually really angering and somewhat embarrassing. Not because it's something I did, but it hurts the platform that you're trying to build. Quick story. So I'm at GunCon, hosted by the Gun Collective, John Patton and his organization, and somebody's like, "Hey man, yeah, I love what you're doing. This is really cool. Let me go ahead and pull up your Instagram. Let me follow you." And I was like, "Oh yeah, just type it in here." He had to type out the entire name, and then there was probably a list of like 5 or 6 other accounts. My name, Armed_Atlas, is very unique. It's not super common. All the way to the bottom, and then you can click on the name. If you misspell anything, it's not gonna pull up. So that instantly tells companies, organizations, well, if you are looking at trying to tap into the Instagram following, there's a ceiling. There's kind of a limit to the amount of push or exposure that you're going to be able to get beyond that, initial following or whoever can actually see the post, right? And you might as well just work with somebody who's not shadow banned. Somebody did ask though, what are the tripwires asking for a friend? I'm assuming you're talking about posting a video that involves self-defense, but there's a lot of people out there posting about, self-defense scenarios or just random violence in the streets. I have, friends of mine who post like, oh man, this person was literally assaulted walking down the street, and either offering commentary or not, but some of those videos are getting millions of views. What are these tripwires, and why are some people immune to the trip?
I don't think anyone's immune to it. I think that if you are cautious about how you post stuff, you can get away with quite a bit. But anything that like ultimately you have to when you're on these platforms, if you're in this space, when you're posting something, you have to be as like incognito about it as possible. So, what I mean by that is, in your description or any words, like, are you specifically using the words like gun or anything that an AI bot would very easily read as like a gun post? Like, that is all going to get picked up. Same thing for hashtags. A lot of hashtags are attached with, again, bots are going to pick it up and be like, oh, okay, this is a post that they're going to push down an algorithm. And for my account, why I suspected that the video I posted would result in a shadow ban was I tagged another account or did like a joint post with them that has been shadow banned, and they're kind of like flagged. So some accounts get so shadow banned that anyone who is affiliated with them kind of gets dragged down as well, which is absolutely lunacy. But I had the discussion before posting that video with other people who had made posts with that account, and they're like, yeah, we noticed a difference. So after I didn't tag them, then yeah, that's when everything came down. So yeah, there's a lot of random stuff to look out for. Same thing when it comes to like sometimes even cover photos.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of times you may not want to have a so part of the shadow ban that I'm experiencing and what most other people start to experience as well is that there will be like this little section you could click into, and it's like these are the unrecommended posts, and YouTube, they all do the same thing. And it's always like something that has the profile of a
Mm-hmm.
gun.
I've noticed that as well.
So
Yeah.
it's just AI, like it, you know, they read it, they're like, oh, there's a gun in this post. So because I've had posts where it's like not even a real firearm, and it still picks up on it. And no matter like if you make any corrections to those posts, or even if you were to delete them, it would just rotate to the next thing. Like once those bots are on your account, like it's just always there. I do. I hope it gets lifted eventually. That's what I'm. When I figure out how to do that, I'll let you know. But
You
right
know,
now, it's like it's there,
are
and
are
so
you
that's
familiar
why
with the Twitter files?
I have heard of them, but I can't say I could like recount the whole story for you.
So sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback from. I gotta put my phone in airplane mode, or it's gonna open my headphones. It's annoying. Um, the Twitter files, more or less, once Elon bought um, Twitter X or whatever, they went through a lot of the documents, internal communications, emails, code, all the stuff, and started like doing exposés through selected what are they called, journalists, and it basically showed like, oh yeah, employees at said company were getting emails and communications from CIA or different or government entities, and even like White House staff members asking for this, or hey, don't do this, or it's like, okay, so what else were you guys doing? And I would love to see. And right now, YouTube is doing okay, as in they're, I don't have a big issue with them, but at one point they were killing channels, like gun related channels, like, and I think somebody called a senator, and then they kind of pulled back a little bit. But I'm just like, I would love to see a Facebook files or a Meta files. I would love to see a YouTube files. Like, what all are you guys? How much of the I guess freedom of doing business and expression and all that you're not saying that you're attacking it, but or at least sometimes you don't. Sometimes you do. But I want to see exactly people's rationale for what exactly they're doing, and I want that to be public. I just want it to be out there for everybody to see and to know, so we can make better choices on who we're going to do business with. Clearly, they have a huge monopoly. You can't make videos on a different platform. You go to Rumble or whatever it is, it's not going to take off unless you're already kind of a big deal and people are looking for you. But if people aren't
Yeah,
checking
I
for you in the
talked to
first place, you're not going to make it.
no, and on some of my posts, I discussed that where, and it brought a lot of conversation from people of on both sides of the fence when it comes to how do we protect like our how do we not get censored ultimately? In my opinion, in what I mm, mm, like, as you said, for any business in today's world, any business, small business, you have got to be on social media. That's your number one form of marketing, and we're dependent on these platforms. It's like you said, you can make a video, but if you're going to get any sort of traction off of it, like you're not going to do that off of Rumble. You're going to do it off of the big three. It's like YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, all of those. And right now we're being censored, which is a First Amendment issue. And people come back and they're like, well, these are private entities. Okay, well,
Are they
so is my
though?
cell phone. But
Yeah.
if Verizon was like, yo, I don't want to do, and they are pretty, but anyways, if they were like, well, we don't want to allow any phone calls or whatever, or we may not allow all phone calls for people who are pro Second Amendment, then that would be a major issue, because everyone has got to use these private cell phone carriers, and we all have got to use private internet carriers. Technically, we could just not use cell phones. We could use snail mail, right?
Or
But
ham radio.
be, or ham radio, but because we live in a modern world, we have a lot of different forms of communication. And today's main form of communication and how most people ingest their information is from YouTube, from Instagram. It's going to be from some sort of social media app. And a friend of mine recently brought up a very good point, and he was like, "This is a Fourth Amendment violation," and I was like, "What?" And you crack open the Constitution and you read that baby, and it talks about privacy of your information, especially when it comes to within your house. And this is all of my information in my house. Like,
Yeah.
that's like opening up my filing cabinet. And right now, all of our stuff is it's a direct violation of that. And
Yeah.
why people aren't putting that together.
I think there's a huge, I think, an incestuous relationship between the federal government, corporations, and the politicians who are in bed with all those people. And the, I suppose the question of digital privacy, what does it mean to live in a multinational world where everything's connected? Some of the biggest apps in the world are not developed in the US, and some of the biggest apps in the world that are bad about privacy and literally scraping all the information that they can just so they can sell you a toothbrush, right? Is they're US based. And then you go to Europe and they're like, yeah, we think data privacy is a big deal. We're going to sue Google because, or fine Google because they're promoting their own search results over other people's, and things that are like, we've kind of taken as like, oh yeah, well that's fine. They're a private corporation. They could do what they want to do. But is it though? Or is it technically, have you created a public square and it's kind of our place? And I don't want to sound like a communist, unless I get removed from the Second Amendment community expeditiously, right? But in reality, isn't Facebook technically a public platform where anyone can get an account, anyone can hop on, and it's almost what they would call like a public utility? And what does that mean for their ability to run it if it were to be shifted over? I know that was a big deal, a big discussion. Oh, is the internet a public utility? Can we promote different things over other things? Can we censor, or can anybody who wants to commit any heinous crime against God and humanity post any vileness on the internet and just call it a day? Can we do that? It's complicated.
It's very complicated, but we have to have these conversations because this is what's going on in today's world. I mean,
Yeah.
at some point, like, people have had to figure out all of the things that help us, I guess, because when one person starts to abuse something, then we have to figure it out. And that's kind of what's going on. So,
Right. I mean, I still have a bunch of questions I want to ask. Was there anything that you just wanted to dive into before I start asking a bunch of questions?
So I'm gonna loop back to finish answering a question you started, and then we got distracted. In terms of tying overlanding to firearms, because we started talking about that, and it's awesome. So just because I feel that most people are outdoor enthusiasts in general tend to be more open-minded about being self-resilient, whether if it's in a self-defense situation or in a just general preparedness mindset. And because the mindsets of these groups of people are similar, that's why I think there's a lot of crossover. If you, let's say, go off in the wilderness on a whole bunch of trails, like, chances are you probably have some sort of a prep kit, and you're being more aware. And I think people who are big advocates within the firearm space who conceal carry, you have that same attitude. You're going out with a prepared attitude, and in general, there's just a lot of crossover. So I just wanted to finish that up before you jumped into questions, in case anyone was like on a cliffhanger, like, but wait a second, did she have an answer for that? I actually did.
Right. I should probably start taking better notes of the questions that I'm, about to dive into that we haven't actually finished, because there are times I'm watching the podcast back and I'm like, man, we never did finish our thoughts on that. I guess we got to do a part two. And then everybody's like, yeah, part two. And I'm like, okay, well, it's going to be a while. So I'm curious because well, first of all, can you tell us, you don't have to say like the exact number if you're uncomfortable, but I feel like we're about the same age. Are you in your 20s, 30s? Where are we in life? Are you able to say,
Oh
am I
yeah,
rude for asking?
I don't care. I mean,
Okay.
I give no cares.
I'm,
Yeah,
I'm, I'm
I'm
glad.
33. Like if yeah, so I'm 33, so young 30s.
Okay, cool. So early 30s and big life changes. That's why I was curious because I know you said you were in the workforce, and I'm 30 next year. My God, oh gosh. And I remember being in my early 20s working for T-Mobile, and then I left and I came back, and I'm just like I'm tired of working for people's empires, building everybody's stuff but my own thing, and guess what? They can fire you in a minute. Like they don't like the way you smell one day, fired. Like especially if
And
you're in a right
I
to work state.
totally. And I think people are in that mindset. Like you earlier you were saying like, well, what's getting people to go outside more, to go camping, to go overlanding, to do all this? It's the same attitude that has people wanting to work for themselves is you when you just start to realize like when you become dependent on these companies, it's like, yeah. So a lot of my writing is definitely like anti-institution stuff. Yeah. So I'm pro like let's figure out what like you're best at and let's capitalize on that because like everyone has a unique filter and whatever it is that lights like your soul on fire, you will be the only person who it does that for in that way. Like even if your intensity level is the same as someone else's, like the way that you perceive everything is going to be totally unique and we have to support that. So to take someone that is passionate about something and then shove them into like an AT&T sales position, like that totally just that's taking away from all of us, and obviously that person, right? So
Yeah.
that's why I'm like all about just don't like wait for your catalyst. Like if you're thinking of something else all the time, you should probably make a plan to get closer to that because that was me before,
Yeah.
you know
I'm
so
I'm I'm curious,
yes.
and thank you for breaking all that down. Earlier we were talking about different things in conserving and conservation of the natural habitats that it's not just animals' natural habitat; it's the habitat that we can all exist in, right? And a lot of discussion has been, or a lot to do has been made. How do you say a lot to do about nothing? I don't know. But a lot of people just get really tight about the climate change things, and it was like 110 the other day here on just what it's supposed to be like the tail end of summer. For why? For why? It was cooking, like
I
AC's
know.
blasting.
Yeah,
It was so
it's been hot.
hot. And people are like, well, climate change. And then we see like Hawaii's literally on fire. Not because it's hot, but because it's dry and it's kind of a bad situation. It's windy and there's hurricanes in California. And it's like, man, I'm like, how does she feel about climate change? Like, I can't tell what your political stance is. Like, I'm like, okay, she seems like she's a bit of a libertarian, a little bit of a populist, but also like, maybe I can't nail you down because you're just you. But maybe you do identify with a particular political affiliation, and how does the way you feel about your, I guess, where you stand in the world of like politics and crap, where does it impact the way you view things like climate change and conservation and stuff like that, or is there a
Nope.
link? Yes, no, maybe.
Nope. um, so, for those of you who don't know me, I am not a political person, really, at all. Even though I might inertly be kind of in a political space because of some of what I do. And
Right.
I do some advocacy work as well in DC where I talk with politicians. So, but even I tell them, I'm like, hello, Mr. Sir, I'm a corporate survivor and I don't do politics, but I am here to talk to you. about guns
With the
from
DC
a
project, if I'm not wrong.
right, yeah,
Yeah, I love those
exactly, and
guys.
that's from a bipartisan standpoint. So I always want to come, and a lot of my most, if not all of my sponsors appreciate that, because I pull followers from all different backgrounds, and I think my reach is fairly unique because I'm not just in my own echo chamber. For some
Mhm.
people, I am the only gun account that they follow. So I like being that liaison where maybe someone started following me because of the travel stuff or the truck stuff or whatever, and then they also get firearm content out of it as well. And I like being that non, you know, sort of that atypical person. And I hate to say that there's even a stereotype, but we all know that there, most people will look at me and not be like, oh my God, yeah, she's still carrying right now. She must be super dangerous. Like, I love being able to meet someone at like a coffee shop, even like this, and I've had tons of just candid conversations with random people who totally knew nothing about guns because I've been in environments like this, and then it comes up and it's like, yeah, I'm carrying right now. Like, you want to talk about like what's been holding you back? What are your concerns? So it's been great. And I would say that I am more, as you mentioned, like libertarian in the sense that I think that if people could just not be stupid and we could just not have government, I would be a happy girl.
Right.
That's my opinion. But we do have a lot of very stupid people in the world, so we do have to regulate, I guess. So on paper, I typically will like identify as like Republican, but yeah, I think that all of it's kind of a crapshoot.
Yeah, I mean, it can be, and somebody's going to be really offended by you saying that, or by me not like dogging you out for saying that. Like, okay, yeah, I mean, it kind of is. I don't generally find myself politically aligned with anyone anymore. Like, I can be a bit socially conservative, but also you see a lot of the stuff that people do, and you're just like, well, that's not good, and you're not actually for gun rights and the people's rights. And maybe you say you're for gun rights, but when it comes down to the people that need to own guns, like, you don't care about them at all. It seems maybe I'm wrong, but tell me something to change my mind, right? And so I am much more frustrated than I am satisfied with the state of politics, in case anybody's wondering, if they were asking. But I do appreciate what you were saying about literally being able to have really open and honest and candid conversations with people who are able to hear it, because I don't generally recommend going around telling people, hey, I'm carrying right now, because it seems like a bad idea. But
No.
if you know your audience, and that's something that can come up, um, you know that's a personal choice and decision, right? So clearly,
Yeah. Oh,
there's
yeah.
that.
Well, it's I think it's one of those things where and it sounds weird, but like people, like when I start talking with people, they'll look at me and they'll be like, "Are you carrying right now?" I'm like, I'm not gonna lie, and be like, "Yeah." Like, what do you think? you know.
I mean, the
So
answer
that's
is
normally
I'm there's a better chance that I'm carrying than one that I'm not.
right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, but I wouldn't go around. I certainly wouldn't go around to a random person, and
It's like walk
yeah,
up to
that would
somebody
be
at
a
Walmart.
yeah. Hey, guess what I'm doing?
Oh my gosh.
No.
Oh man.
Yep. Oh
So
my gosh. Yeah. It is all of those things. But we do get people from all sorts of different perspectives, whether it's politically or whatever. And I feel like I'm able to talk with pretty much everyone. You know, yeah.
that's awesome. So we're actually gonna start transitioning to the questions. So if anyone in the live chat who's here right now has questions, or conversely, if you are on the podcast side and you see that we have a scheduled interview coming up, and you're like, oh my gosh, I love that person, or I have no idea who that person is, but let me ask this question. It's entirely random. Just fire that into the email address info@costlymedia.com, or at the instagram.com/ at armed_atlas, because that's how you can get a hold of me. But of course, if you guys are live with me right now, I have some questions, but we could always use more. My goodness. So we already talked. Did we talk? How do you feel about climate change? First of all, I'm really
Oh yeah,
curious to
I never
hear.
did answer that.
Yeah.
Okay, so none of this is founded by science, but in my opinion, well, I guess it is. It's just like from my experience and what I've read in history and what I understand about the world as it operates, we have gone through different climate change evolutions for an extremely long period of time. It's very normal for our planet to go through these evolutions. I think what we are going through right now is fairly normal based off of our past history. About 100 to 200 years ago, it was very cold normally, and normally we go through those swings where there'll be cold temperature years and hot temperature years. So I think that part of this is kind of where we should be. And then obviously within the last 100 to 150 or so years ago, there's been a lot of industrialization. And I do feel that obviously has affected things, but our planet is very much kind of like a liver. I've never made this analogy, but this is how it's working in my brain.
A
And that
liver.
a liver, it cleans things out. So we put toxins in the river, like the Mississippi. That thing used to be like you could die from it because there was all the sewage went in the Mississippi. But very quickly, I don't want to say quickly, but it took time. It rehabilitated itself. So we're able to, our planet is able to process stuff as long as we allow it to do so. So I think that people who are concerned about climate change should probably just start living more eco-friendly, and that will make the difference. So I guess what I mean by that is like, I think that your average person is extremely wasteful.
Mm.
You buy a lot of single-use items, and there's a lot of garbage, and all of that I think affects things more than trying to make regulations on, like, let's say let's go all electric with cars. Like that's not our problem.
Yeah. I would say
So
the amount of waste that would come just from that transition alone, like throwing away cars that have another 10 to 15, 20 years on them, that's kind of frightening. And it also is frustrating that a lot of the vehicles that we have today don't live as long as the ones that existed 20 years ago or that were manufactured 20 years ago, 30, 40, 50 years ago. But I don't want to
yeah,
interrupt.
no, you're good. And so I mean, I can't say that I've ever really spoken on this topic before, so I'd be
Sure. Yeah,
curious what
I
you
was just
think.
trying to
But
hear your thoughts because I know you
yeah,
are
I mean,
concerned about conserving the environments that you travel to. And I'm like, okay, yeah, well, I
yeah,
do see where like India has terrible pollution, and if you were to go,
yeah,
visit there, it's like with the whole country, it's like there's really big, at least in the populated areas, it's like smog out the wazoo. New York had really bad smog. The Canadian wildfires
yeah,
created additional smog, and it's like, well, that is a natural. When I say smog, that is a natural pollution that happens when wildfires occur. But also, like, how does the world respond, and how do the people in the world that have to exist in this space, how do we respond to it? What are our responsibilities? I notice that I'm taking out a bag of trash a day, and a lot of it's just Amazon boxes. Like, what do I do differently to make sure that I'm not literally just creating a pile somewhere that just exists and
yeah.
it's never going away? It seems.
I think it's I think it's all common sense. Like let's just start off by saying like I've always been like let's say a motorhead, right? So I've
Right.
always had like different motorcycles and cars and all sorts of stuff. So I am super pro like let's mm, yeah. Not everything I do is one would imagine as being the most eco-friendly.
Sure. I mean,
And
you like
what
a V8 Hemi, you know?
yeah, exactly. But I think those are the stereotypical things that have been assigned to not being eco-friendly. And when I started living on the road, living off grid, I had to pick up different habits, not because I thought like it was morally the right thing to do to be eco-friendly, but simply because it's like I have to deal with this. When you are in a very small space and you live off grid, it becomes apparent how dependent on the system we are. Um, so for example, like we talked about trash, so I don't have like trash service now. This is the first time in my life where I've never had a transfer station. Like I've always had either a transfer station to go to or a trash service. So it's like, well, what the hell do I do with my trash? And like I have to find basic, so one is reducing it. And so I literally reduce trash for the selfish reason of I don't want to have to deal with it. And the byproduct of that is, there's less waste. So I don't have to deal with it because, yeah.
But isn't that like
Yeah.
such an elementary, but almost like the smart thing to do? It's like, you're tired. I have a little kid, so it's like, oh my gosh, I'm tired of them spilling spaghetti all over the countertop. How can I kind of clean this process up and reduce the amount of food that's going
Yeah.
in the trash or food that's going on the counter? And like you just do little things to make your life a little bit easier, and in the long run it actually makes the whole situation better, unless you do the maybe the
Yep.
thing that's the too easy process, which is making the world a little bit worse, if we're being for real.
Yeah. And all of this stuff, in my opinion, is very common sense. It's just not everyone does it. It's very easy to be lazy, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's, and I'm wondering if more of us lived not necessarily like nomadic, but off grid, where we didn't have a trash service. Would we be a little bit better about like, okay, let's reduce some of this stuff down. Let's get some boxes that'll hold up, so we don't have to keep using new boxes for this or that, or switch over to like some sort of stainless steel, so we don't have to throw this out. Every it's like, what
Oh
would we
yeah.
do differently?
It because all of that starts to change. Like you really
Hmm.
start to realize like what was a one use consumable that I use regularly, and you kind of go through that checklist, and it's like, holy moly, that is a lot more items than I had thought. And when you start to, and living in a small space forces you to tally up everything really that you have. And so that's been a lot of my life over the last couple of years, because we actually have a cargo trailer. So this is how we're living on the road. We have a cargo trailer that we have converted into like a camper or a tiny house, whatever you want to call it. And
Nice.
part of that process has been figuring out what is like the bare minimum we need to live with and to be happy with. And it started as just like I just want to get rid of a lot of stuff in my life, and I just want to be more nimble. Where now it's a total mindset change, in terms of like I don't need that. Like my relationship with material items has had to take a big change,
Yeah.
because yeah,
I
I
mean,
used to get, yeah. It's quite a bit going to like from a normal size house, and you have acreage and a garage, and now I'm in 120 square feet. So
right. You gotta really, the economy of space is a thing. Now, is the camper, is that on your IG? If people are like really curious about what that looks like, or have you kept that private to yourself?
there should be some pictures. I haven't posted a lot. I totally wanted to go into it and just record the whole process, like all of those really cool influencers do. But that takes a lot of work. And also, let's like that hasn't been my focus.
Hmm.
I've been wanting to. It's like I've had to make a lot of decisions as to what I want to focus on, and part of me wanted to do this huge project where I shared the cargo conversion, because there was a point where I felt like I literally watched the entire YouTube playlist on cargo conversions, and I'm like, I'm out of video to watch. Like
Like,
I
how does that
should
even
create.
happen? How are you out of videos to watch on YouTube? Billion
I
hours
know.
uploaded a daily.
I swear. Well, I will say over the last couple of years, cargo trailer conversions have gotten more popular.
Hmm.
So the playlist is a lot bigger than when I was looking. It looks like a lot of people have done it since. Yeah, it's just enough, honestly, to do the projects versus like trying to find the right camera angle and trying to get the right
Right.
shots. It's like, okay,
You're
I'm
just
just
trying to
trying to
get it
figure
done.
out how
Not
to do
everything has to be
this.
content.
I'm Yeah, not everything has to be and that's like where I had to decide, okay, what content is important to me and what content are my followers looking for. And my followers are totally looking for gun content, that I know for a fact.
Yeah,
All of my gun content performs very well, so I like to make sure to have focus on that. And then I personally have a additional huge passion just for journalism. So then I focus on that as well. And so there will be stuff that'll come out on the cargo trailer, but it's not going to be like as involved as some of my other stuff.
for sure. Okay, so we're hitting the point where we have just a few minutes left to do a Q&A. So let's go ahead and take a few minutes and thank the organization, entity, company that really helps out a lot with what we do here. So, guys, if you didn't already know, we're talking about Obsidian Tactics once more, once again. They might be live in the chat with us right now. I hope they are. If they disappeared, I'm gonna be so mad. I'm gonna send an angry text message. But thank you to Obsidian Tactics for helping out a whole lot. They've sent so much that really, if they didn't send it, it wouldn't happen. So thank you. If you're interested in buying 2A related gear, some survival stuff, we're ordering some additional tourniquets from them right now. They have multiple colors. Do they have the training tourniquets? I'm curious. I don't know. I think they do. I have to check. But if you use code Armed Atlas at checkout, whatever the $10, $15 shipping was going to be, that's going to be at zero. So free shipping. Why would you buy it from Amazon when you can go support a small pro Second Amendment company that actually cares about you getting great gear and free shipping? So better than all the other options. Yes, there's other companies out here who are doing a great job, but this is the one that I really respect, and I've had plenty of conversations with the owner, and when you have those kinds of relationships where you know exactly what how do you say this? The benefit of supporting certain people is apparent in the results. So check out Obsidian Tactics. If you see something you like, buy it, use the code. Some of you have not used the code, and I'm wondering why you enjoy, spending money on shipping. That doesn't make any sense to me. So check them out. And now back to the show. Taylor. So there have been a few questions from the audience as we were going. It sounds like you're making some new fans, but we'll see, right?
Good. I can't see any of the comments, y'all. So I'm like, I have no idea how they're responding to anything.
Yeah, I'll pull them up. And thank you to DJ Play Nice for attaching into the live chat the link for Obsidian Tactics. And it looks like they are in the chat. They do have the blue training tourniquets because you don't want to use your normal tourniquet if you're just practicing, right? That's not a good idea. So what's in your pack in, pack out? I'm not even familiar with that term. I guess some
Pack in, pack out.
Yeah, is that a thing?
It's like leave no trace. It's kind of it's that mentality.
Oh,
like
okay.
Whatever you carry in, you carry out. That's it. Leave no trace.
Cool. Well, I thought it was talking about something else. I thought it was talking about like backpack type stuff, but that makes way more sense. I'm ignorant. Do you have like a pack that you kind of keep with you when you're not like attached to your truck or whatever?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, oh my God, there's another train. Oh, what the hell?
And its natural habitat.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
So ever since I hit the road, I've always kept my hiking pack with me. I normally have my truck. When I don't have my truck, I feel super discombobulated because I could like live out of my truck. I can respond to most any situation as long as I have my truck. And there's a train, so I am so sorry, y'all. Oh, it's coming.
Well, let's see the train.
Can you see? There we go.
Classic American
This
train.
one's That's right. Lots of graffiti all over it. This one's a little quiet. It is carrying some sort of, I don't know what it is, but anyways, so I do keep a hiking backpack in with me in my truck at all times, and as long as I have that, I know I'm pretty much all set. So that has, I feel like everything I need. If I could be like dropped off in the woods, and I'll be good for at least a few days, unless like I could start catching and hunting stuff, and I'll be good for a little while. So
Yeah.
I have everything in there to keep me sustainable for a while.
I would ask, do you keep a suppressed 22 just in case you have to hunt a varmint? But I don't want you to tell all your business. So
Right? Yes, you do have to be ready for things.
so somebody, this wasn't a question, but it was more of a statement. DJ Play Nice said targets like glass bottles, old appliances, etc. are bad. Do you feel that same way?
Well,
I know you said TVs
obviously,
aren't a
I
big
mean,
deal.
no, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't be shooting any of those things for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I could see if you had a way to like actually clean it up, like if you put down a big tarp, you know, I
No one's
still don't
doing
think
that.
you could. I don't think you could
No.
reasonably or feasibly do that and really expect the best results. Anyways, um, she fires, who is awesome. I think she said she followed you. Said in another life she could have been a nomad. What's stopping you?
Yeah, a lot of people definitely romanticize this lifestyle or want to be a part of it or experience a part of it in some way. That is something I find very. It, it's always like, how do I respond to that? Because a lot of people, kind of like yourself, get caught up in situations where it's like your life is just not really conducive because you get established in a job or you have kids that have their own connections, and being a little bit more of a free spirit could it's more difficult the older you get. Um, I will say that it comes with a it's not easy. Most people I think are smart enough to recognize that though.
Yeah,
It's not always easy. It comes with a lot of work and a lot of sacrifices, like having your own Wi-Fi. I know Starlink's a thing. I'm working up to that, but
I
one thing
think
at a time.
there's an off grid. It's like your off grid adventure lifestyle. I don't know. There's it's unusually long names for pages like yours. Usually, anyways. So she was talking about getting some Starlink in, and I was like, oh man, that must be great. But I'm not even sure. Like we see the Ukraine thing happening right now, and they're using Starlink. I'm wondering how good it is really. Have you ever used Starlink before? Have you tested it yet? Or
I've heard great things from people who have it. When it first came out, I mean, they were still getting a lot of the satellites up. All right, that's the last of the train. Sorry, guys.
yay?
They were still getting a lot of the satellites up, but from everything I've heard now, it works great. I've, you know, yeah, it's just something I haven't jumped onto yet.
I wonder. I'm curious. Uh, when you're as a nomad, I'm assuming okay, your husband's income is what it is, right? So as long as he's gainfully employed, you at least have that. But a lot of what you do is like freelance type work, and okay, so we're in an existing relationship here, but because of the nature of being a nomad and freelancing, nothing's guaranteed. Like, is that ever a concern where you're like, okay, well, we got to pay for this, how are we going to make sure that we're locked in with the amounts that we need to finance this next adventure?
Yeah, I mean, it's like anyone who is a freelancer, anyone who is an entrepreneur. Like, it's until you get your business off the ground into a certain place where you know that things are steady. It's yeah, everything's a risk, and that's why I stayed in the workforce for a long time because I was concerned about questions just like yours, like how do you how do you guarantee this stuff and like it's very hard to generate work if you don't put yourself in the position to do that and like, I don't know. I think that if you also live frugally, like, and you don't need a lot of material things, then it doesn't become as much of an issue. So I've been approaching things as like right now, um, for any projects that I'm wanting to pursue, I'm looking at it not necessarily from the mindset of, can I get a contract or can I get a job to pay for this? My mindset right now is more like, okay, what is it, this thing that I need? And can I work with them or it directly in order to get it? So, for example, it's like on my truck, there's totally some upgrades that I would love to do. And if there is like a specific company that I know might do those upgrades, instead of just trying to get a contract and pay for it, instead it's like, well, let's barter. Like, how can I support you and your company, and we can negotiate a deal, whether, and so that's where the marketing comes in, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like, and that's what I do is I market, where it's like, okay, well, either I do a product review, or maybe I do promotion for you, or I go out and do a photo shoot for you. Like, these are conversations that I have with companies all the time, and every relationship is different. But that's typically how I'm going after things. If there's something that obviously that just requires straight up cash money, then yeah, you know, mama saves her pennies for that. But
I got you.
otherwise, I'm trying to live in a free society.
Yeah, I know
That makes,
for
yeah,
yeah, that makes perfect sense for me. I know for myself with this podcast, it's survived as long as it has because we've done everything in our power to keep the overhead low. Like if there's a
yeah.
program that's better and it's subscription based, and if there's a program that's almost as good but it's a one time payment, I'm just gonna do the one time payment because Adobe is charging way too much for everything they have. So
Dude,
like,
oh my
forget it
god. And I've had Photoshop since the days like when I think I paid $400 to get it on a
for a
disc, and
CD,
it was like
right? For a
my,
license, right?
yeah. And so when I got back on Adobe and they're like subscription, I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, you see, you had to own this stuff.
Your life is a
They want you
subscription
for,
right now.
oh, it is. So I've been unsubscribing from everything, and that ties back to just like, again, living frugally, figuring out what you actually need versus what you want. And really, we just every now and then we get stressed out about stuff, but it's like, you know what, most people in our situation have like hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. Like, we're working for, just like to be 100% debt free, and we're
That's
closer to
awesome.
that than I think most people are.
I
And
mean,
part of
how
that
free
is
are
like,
you really if you're not debt free? You know.
well, and that's totally it. And I'm actually just wrapping up a wonderful book right now called The Grapes of Wrath. You might have heard of it. um, and it talks a lot about what happens when the banks own you and what happens to our civilization. But I've always
Hmm.
wanted to be debt free. I've done a pretty good job of that, and again, living minimally,
Yeah,
that
I mean,
helps.
when you're in a situation where they can call the loan on things that you thought you owned, that's um, that's kind of scary. So there's so many more questions. I'm going to try to get through them pretty quickly
Yeah,
because we only have a few minutes that we promised me, and then obviously every minute after that's a gift. So hoping we can wrap this up like ASAP if I could stay focused. Ooh, this one's good. Question from DJ Play Nice again. All the questions. What books inspired you as a child, and which ones have you found useful in your current life?
well, I just mentioned The Grapes of Wrath. That's a great book I'm wrapping up right now. And I know, okay, so I'm going to respond to this by saying 1984. Um, I was
Yeah.
in middle school the first time I read that book. Um, and it's been one of the few books that I've actually reread because it's so dense, especially like maturing.
Yeah.
Having an older perspective helps with that particular book. Um, but yeah, it's, I would say that one because written in the 30s, but extremely accurate 100 years later.
It's really interesting how we are like all the YA books. If you've ever seen Hunger Games to whatever, the ones that make movies off of these days, right? They're all super dystopian. But of all the dystopian books, that is the most dystopian. So there's that.
I know. I don't know if that was the kind of answer they were looking for.
I feel like yes. Once again, what's your podcast called? This was a question from earlier. We would just want to remind people.
It's Seeker Radio, so that's Seeker, Seeker Radio, and yeah, so you could find me on, and actually you and I talked about this off air earlier, but you could find me on every platform except Apple right now because I'm still waiting for that verification process. I did call Apple directly, and yeah, and so anyways, I was promised to be emailed a link, which was not emailed, so I was like, womp womp. But to explain what I'm talking about, so my podcast, none of the YouTube videos that I watched on how to air a podcast discussed this verification period. So once you hit the go button of like, we're launching, all of the hosts, which distribute the podcast, like want to verify your show. And Apple, because it's Apple, of course, has like the longest verification process. And you said yours took like months.
Yeah.
Gosh, I hope and that's part of why, like, I hate to say this, I didn't push too hard to get my other episode out because I'm like, it's like 40% of people listen to podcasts on iTunes. So
yeah, it opened my podcast way up. Yeah. Like the numbers doubled. As soon as we got an Apple. Like,
exactly.
It really
it's
helped.
like 40%. Yeah, but no, thank you guys. And I'm actually, again, I'm producing an episode right now. It's taken forever because, as I mentioned before, it's not just recording an episode and uploading it. There's a lot of collaboration that goes into it. So I have supportive content. Typically, there's artwork. There's all sorts of things that go with it. So I'm excited to be releasing. The next one I'm doing, actually, we do talk about conservation outside. It's going to be with Rory Irish. So he is the off-road recovery truck driver in Moab, Utah, which is one of the top off-roading destinations. This is the first podcast he's been on, which is really cool. But we talk about a lot of what's going on out west and, in the off-roading scene. So yeah, that'll be cool.
Excellent. So I think that's all we're going to tackle for now. This has been the most interesting podcast I've ever done. And I'm so glad we could. Yeah, no, it really has. In great ways. I mean, we had so many trains going by, and it was funny, in my opinion. Somebody was like, this is the most unintentionally funny podcast that you'd ever seen. And I would say so. I'm like, yeah, let's just chill out. It's not that big a deal. It's just a train, right? Like, this is, I feel like, a glimpse into who you actually are, like, IRL. And hopefully the next time we do this podcast, hopefully we can do it on your show. But if we do it on my show again, hopefully we can find a way to actually do it in person and sit down and really just kind of dive deep into like, what does it actually take to like make this thing work, right? Maybe we do a bus tour or whatever, who knows?
That would be great. And thanks for asking me about my show. I didn't want to like hijack your show to talk about that one, but I appreciate your interest with it because it is so new, and we got to talk, I think, right after I launched the first episode. And as someone who is in the same space, I always love having those conversations with people who's going through the same stuff, because it's like we get to talk about the stuff that you don't hear on videos or you can't Google. So I always appreciate that. And I'm in Texas all of the time. So next time I'm through, I would love to meet up with you. That would be awesome. So I'll be in Texas this fall, actually, which, oh my God, we're at the end of August, which means that's
right here. It's right here. My goodness, man. Wow. This was really fun. Can you just remind people where to find you if there's anything you want to share as you're signing off?
Yeah, so you could find me on Instagram at She the Seeker, and also on a podcast with Seeker Radio. So that's Seeker Radio Podcast. Yeah, that's going to be the main way.
All right. We're getting calls for a part 2. I'm with it. And guys, thank you so much for sticking with us. I know this was a fun conversation, and I had a lot of fun. This isn't the traditional pure gun podcast, whatever, but I'm glad we could have it. I think there was a lot of what they call costly conversations had here. Really quickly, for those of you on the video podcast side, if you like this shirt, this is the Costly Gas shirt. It's an old design, but I've not produced it officially for anybody other than myself to wear in videos and just to kind of try on. And I like it, but if you like it, let me know. And maybe we'll make it available in a limited run, just because. And let me know. If you want to support this show, patreon.com/Armed Atlas. Join up there. $5 a month or more, however much you want to give. You want to give 25? You want to give $50? It's up to you. I don't care. Though I will accept it graciously so we can put everything back into this place, back in the studio, build it out a little bit more, get some cool lights, and whatever other projects that we're doing. It's up to you. Thank you so much. And remember, keep it costly.